The recreation room went dead silent. Every single inmate froze. Cards hung midair. Weights stopped clanking. Even the ceiling fans seemed to hold their breath. Marcus Big Tank Thompson stood 6'5", 280 pounds of pure prison muscle. His neck was thicker than most men's thighs. His fists had sent 17 inmates to the medical ward over 12 years. 3 of them never walked right again. And right now, those fists were clenched at his sides, veins bulging like angry snakes crawling up his forearms. Standing in front of him was a 63-year-old man who barely reached his chin. The old inmate didn't flinch, didn't step back, didn't even blink. He just stood there with his hands clasped loosely in front of him, looking up at Big Tank with eyes that held absolutely nothing. No fear, no anger, no challenge, just nothing. And somehow, that nothing was the most terrifying thing anyone on Block D had ever witnessed. "I'm going to ask you one more time, old man," Big Tank growled, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. "You going to pay what you owe? Or do I got to teach you how things work on my block?" The old inmate tilted his head slightly. When he spoke, his voice was so quiet that inmates had to lean in to hear. "Son, I've been paying debts my whole life, just not the kind you're thinking of." Big Tank's eye twitched. In 12 years of running Block D, no one had ever spoken to him like that. No one had ever stood their ground. No one had ever looked at him like he was irrelevant. What happened next would become legend. Inmates would whisper about it for decades. Guards would shake their heads in disbelief when they told the story. Because in the next 3 minutes, everything Big Tank had built over 12 years came crumbling down. But to understand how we got here, I need to take you back to the beginning. But before I continue, if you're new to Behind Bar Tales, this is the channel where we bring you the most intense, raw, and real stories from behind prison walls. Stories of survival, stories of redemption, stories that will change the way you see the world behind bars. If you don't want to miss stories like this one, take a second right now and hit that subscribe button. Click that notification bell so you're the first to know when we drop new content. Trust me, you're gonna want to hear how this story ends. Now let's go back to where it all began. Millbrook State Penitentiary sat on 200 acres of dead land in the middle of nowhere. The nearest town was 40 miles east. The nearest hope was even further. Built in 1952, the prison had housed some of the state's most violent offenders for over 7 decades. The walls were thick, the guards were tired, and the inmates had created their own world with its own rules. Block D was the oldest housing unit in Millbrook. 4 tiers of cells stacked on top of each other. 212 inmates packed into a space designed for 150. The concrete was stained with decades of stories no one wanted to tell. And for 12 years, one man had ruled it all. Marcus Thompson arrived at Millbrook in 2011. He was 26 years old, fresh off a conviction for aggravated assault and armed robbery. He'd beaten a store owner so badly the man spent 3 months in a coma. But Marcus wasn't just violent, he was smart. Within his first week, he'd studied the power structure of Block D. He identified the current shot caller, a 40-year-old lifer named Raymond Cross. He studied Raymond's weaknesses, his habits, his blind spots. On day 9, Marcus made his move. The story goes that Marcus walked up to Raymond in the chow hall during dinner. 300 inmates watching, guards stationed at every corner. Marcus didn't say a word. He just sat down across from Raymond and started eating off his tray. In prison, that's not just disrespect. That's a declaration of war. Raymond stood up, ready to make an example out of this young newcomer. He never got the chance. What happened next took less than 30 seconds. When it was over, Raymond was on the ground with a broken jaw, a shattered eye socket, and a lesson he'd never forget. The guards rushed in, dragged Marcus to solitary. He spent 60 days in the hole. When he came out, everything had changed. Raymond had been transferred to protective custody. His crew had scattered, and Block D was waiting for a new king. Marcus Thompson became Big Tank, and Big Tank became law. I arrived at Millbrook in 2019. I was 24 years old, serving 5 years for a robbery I'd been stupid enough to commit. First time in prison, first time truly understanding what fear meant. My name's Derek, And I'm the one telling you this story because I watched every moment of it unfold. My first day on Block D, I learned the rules fast. Big Tank ran everything. And I mean everything. Want to use the phones without waiting for hours? You paid Big Tank. Want the good jobs in the kitchen or the library? Big Tank decided. Want to avoid trouble, stay safe, keep your head down? You paid a weekly tax, commissary items, money sent to outside accounts, favors, services. Everyone paid. The ones who didn't, they became examples. I watched a man named Terrence refuse to pay during my second month. He was a first-timer like me, thought he could just ignore the system, thought the guards would protect him. The guards didn't see anything. They found Terrence in the shower room with 3 broken ribs and his face so swollen his own mother wouldn't recognize him. He was transferred to another facility, never came back. After that, I paid. Everyone paid. Big Tank had 4 main enforcers. They called themselves the Council. First was Deshaun, a wiry man with quick hands and dead eyes. He collected the taxes. He knew exactly what everyone had in their commissary accounts. He knew when money came in from outside. Nothing escaped Deshaun. Second was Victor, a giant almost as big as Tank himself. He was the muscle, the one who delivered the examples. He never spoke, never had to. His presence alone was enough to make inmates empty their pockets. Third was Kenny, a smooth talker who handled the gambling operations. Cards, dice, betting on sports, betting on fights. Kenny ran it all and made sure the house always won. And the house was Big Tank. Fourth was Malcolm, the oldest of the group at 45. Malcolm handled the contraband, phones, substances. Whatever you needed, Malcolm could get it. For a price, always for a price. Together, they kept Block D under Tank's control. A perfect system, a prison within a prison, and for 12 years, nobody challenged it, until October 17th, 2023. The day Walter Briggs walked through the gates, I remember the first time I saw him. It was during morning count. The guards were doing their rounds, checking cells, making sure nobody had escaped or died during the night. Standard routine. Then I heard the gate buzz, new arrival. We always paid attention to new arrivals. Fresh fish meant new targets for Big Tank, new sources of income, new potential examples. But when I saw who walked in, I almost laughed. He was old, I mean really old. Thin white hair combed neatly to the side. Wire-rimmed glasses sitting on a weathered face. He couldn't have weighed more than 160 pounds. His posture was slightly stooped. His hands were wrinkled and spotted with age. He looked like somebody's grandfather, like he should be sitting on a porch somewhere feeding birds, not walking into one of the state's most violent cell blocks. The guards escorted him to his cell. Bottom tier, 3 doors down from mine. Cell 14. I watched him walk past. He moved slowly, deliberately, each step measured and precise. But something about the way he moved made me pause. I'd seen old inmates before. They usually had a certain look, fear masked by resignation, acceptance of their vulnerability. They knew they were prey in here. This old man didn't have that look. His eyes swept the block as he walked, taking in everything, every face, every camera, every exit, every shadow. It was subtle. Most people wouldn't have noticed. But I did, and apparently so did Big Tank. I saw Tank watching from the second tier, his massive arms resting on the railing, his eyes tracking the old man like a predator watching new prey enter his territory. But there was something else in Tank's expression, something I'd never seen before. Curiosity. The old man kept to himself for the first few days. He ate alone in the chow hall, spent most of his time in his cell reading, didn't talk to anyone unless spoken to. When he did speak, his voice was so quiet you had to strain to hear him. The rumors started immediately. Some guys said he was a snitch who'd been moved for protection. Others said he was a child predator, the lowest of the low. There was talk that he was a former cop who'd killed someone. Nobody knew for sure. His file said armed robbery and second-degree murder, 30 years to life. He'd already served 28 at other facilities before being transferred to Millbrook for reasons nobody explained. 28 years. That meant he'd first gone to prison in 1995. That meant whatever world he'd survived in, it was harder and more brutal than anything we'd known. But he looked so fragile. So harmless. On day 4, Deshaun made his move. I was in the common area when it happened, pretending to read a magazine but really watching everything like I always did. Survival meant awareness. Deshaun slid up next to the old man, who was sitting alone at a metal table, reading a worn paperback. "Hey, Pops." Deshaun's voice was friendly. It was always friendly at first. "You settling in okay?" The old man looked up slowly. His expression didn't change. "Just fine. Thank you for asking." "Good. Good." Deshaun sat down across from him. "Listen, I'm going to help you out. Make sure your time here goes smooth. Block D can be dangerous for a man your age. A lot of young wolves in here, you know. But you don't gotta worry, we got a system." The old man said nothing, just watched. "It's simple," Deshaun continued. "You pay a little tax each week, commissary, maybe some funds transferred outside. In return, you get protection. Nobody bothers you. Nobody touches you. You get to do your time in peace." Deshaun leaned back, smiling like he'd just offered the deal of a lifetime. The old man was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "I appreciate the offer, young man, but I'll have to decline." Deshaun's smile flickered. That's not really how this works, Pops." "I understand how it works." The old man's voice remained calm. "I've been understanding how it works for 28 years, and I've spent that entire time not paying anyone anything." Deshaun stared at him. "You're making a mistake, old man." "Perhaps." The old man returned to his book. "Wouldn't be my first." Deshaun stood up slowly. His friendly mask was gone now. "Big Tank's gonna hear about this." The old man turned to Paige. "I'm sure he will." Deshaun walked away, already pulling out the contraband phone to make the report. I watched the old man. His hands were steady. His breathing was even. He continued reading like nothing had happened, like he hadn't just signed his own death warrant. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the old man, about what he'd done. Nobody said no to Deshaun. Nobody said no to the tax. I'd seen what happened to people who resisted. Part of me wanted to warn him, tell him to change his mind before it was too late. But getting involved meant putting a target on my own back. I had 3 more years to serve. I needed to keep my head down, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was different about this situation. The next morning, Big Tank made his move. It happened during breakfast. The chow hall was packed, 200 inmates eating their powdered eggs and stale toast. Guards stationed at the corners, half asleep as usual. Big Tank walked in with the council behind him. The room went quiet. People got out of the way. Some inmates literally picked up their trays and moved to other tables just to clear a path. Tank made his way to where the old man sat, alone. Same spot as always. Tank sat down across from him. Victor stood behind Tank like a mountain casting a shadow. Deshaun and Kenny flanked them. Malcolm watched from a few tables away. "So you're the one causing problems." Tank's voice was a deep rumble, not loud. He never had to be loud. Everyone listened anyway. The old man looked up from his oatmeal. "I wasn't aware I was causing any problems." "You told my boy no." Tank leaned forward. "Nobody tells my boys no. You understand that?" "I understand that's the rule you've established." "It ain't a rule." Tank's eyes narrowed. "It's the law. My law. Been the law for 12 years. And you think you can just walk in here and ignore it?" The old man set down his spoon. "What's your name, son?" Tank blinked. Nobody asked him questions. He asked the questions. "They call me Big Tank." "I'm sure they do. But what's your name? The one your mother gave you?" Something flashed across Tank's face. Confusion. Maybe anger. "Marcus." "Marcus." The old man nodded. "I'm Walter. Nice to meet you." Tank stared at him like he was speaking another language. "You're either crazy or stupid, old man." "Possibly both." Walter took a sip of his coffee. "But I've found that most things people think are crazy are really just things they don't understand." Tank stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "You got 24 hours. You pay what you owe, plus interest for wasting my time. Or we're gonna have a real problem." Walter looked up at him. "Marcus, I'm going to give you some advice. Free of charge. What you're building here, it doesn't last. It never lasts. I've seen a dozen men like you over the years. Strong, smart, ruthless. They all thought they were kings. He paused. They all fell. The chow hall was absolutely silent. I don't think anyone was even breathing. Tank's jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscles bulging. 24 hours. He turned and walked away. The council followed. The whole room exhaled. I looked at Walter. He'd returned to his oatmeal like nothing had happened. That afternoon, I did something stupid. I approached Walter. He was in the yard, sitting alone on a concrete bench, watching the clouds drift by. I sat down next to him. My heart was pounding. "You need to pay him." Walter didn't look at me. "And why is that?" "Because he'll kill you. Or worse, I've seen what he does to people who don't pay. You won't survive it." Walter was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled. It was a sad smile. The smile of someone who'd seen too much. "What's your name, young man?" "Derek." "Derek," he nodded. "How much time you have left?" 3 years. 3 years. He turned to look at me. His eyes were sharp behind those wire-rimmed glasses. "And in those 3 years, you want to keep your head down, stay out of trouble, pay the tax, do your time, go home." "Yeah. And when you go home, what then? You pay rent to a landlord, taxes to the government, interest to the banks. You spend your whole life paying because you're afraid of what happens if you don't." I didn't know what to say. "I've been in prison for 28 years, Walter continued. "I was 35 when I came in. A different man, an angry man. I did terrible things to get here, things that still haunt me." He looked back at the clouds. "But somewhere along the way, I realized something. The prison isn't these walls. It isn't the guards or the gangs or the rules. The prison is fear. The moment you stop being afraid, you're already free." I shook my head. "That's philosophy. This is real. Tank is real. What he'll do to you is real." "Oh, I know it's real." Walter's voice was soft. "I've had my bones broken, my face cut. I've been stabbed twice. I've spent more time in solitary than most men spend in their entire sentences. I know exactly what's real." He stood up slowly, stretching his old bones. "But I also know what I'm willing to accept. And I decided a long time ago that I'd rather face whatever comes than live on my knees." He patted my shoulder. "You're a good kid, Derek. Thanks for the warning." He walked away, and I sat there, knowing I'd just watched a dead man walking. The 24 hours passed. I barely slept. I kept waiting for it to happen. The attack, the beating, the message that would be sent. But morning came. Nothing. Afternoon came. Still nothing. By evening, the whole block was buzzing with tension. Everyone knew the deadline had passed. Everyone was waiting to see what Tank would do. The answer came during recreation time. The rec room was packed. Inmates playing cards, lifting weights, watching the old TV mounted in the corner. Guards stationed near the doors. Bored as usual, Tank walked in with the council. The room went quiet. They walked straight to where Walter was sitting. He was playing chess, alone, moving pieces for both sides. Tank stood over him. "Time's up, old man." Walter didn't look up. He moved a white bishop across the board. "Yes, I suppose it is. You got my money?" "No." Tank grabbed the chessboard and threw it across the room. Pieces scattered everywhere. Walter finally looked up. "That was a good game." Tank grabbed him by the collar, lifting him to his feet. "You think this is funny? You think you can disrespect me? You know what I'm going to do to you?" And that's when it happened. That's when the whole room went silent, when weights stopped clanking, when cards hung midair. Walter's hands came up slowly, not to fight, not to resist. He simply placed them over Tank's massive fists, and he looked up at him with those empty eyes. "Marcus, let me tell you a story." Tank's grip tightened. "I don't want to hear no story. It's about a man I knew, a long time ago. His name was James Carter. They called him the Warden, not because he was an actual warden, because he ran his block so completely, so totally, that he might as well have been." Walter's voice was calm, conversational, like they were two old friends chatting. "James was strong, smart, ruthless. Sound familiar? He had everyone under his control. Guards looked the other way. Inmates feared him. He thought he was untouchable. Tank's eye twitched. What happened to him? I killed him. The words hung in the air. Tank's grip loosened, just slightly. Took me 3 years to set it up, Walter continued. I watched. I waited. I learned every weakness, every pattern, every blind spot. And when the time came, I ended his reign in less than a minute. He looked around the room at all the watching inmates. After that, I made a decision. I would never pay tribute to any man again. I would never bow down. I would never be afraid. He looked back at Tank. 14 men have tried to change my mind over 28 years. Some of them hurt me badly. Some of them almost killed me. But not a single one of them walked away whole. Tank stared at him. You're 63 years old. I could break you in half. You could try. Walter's voice was still calm. But ask yourself this, Marcus. I've been here for 2 weeks. I knew this moment was coming. I've had 2 weeks to prepare. He tilted his head. Have you searched your cell lately? Checked your food? Counted your allies? Do you know for certain that every member of your council is still loyal? Do you know what I was before I came to prison? Tank's eyes flickered. Doubt. The first crack. I was a Marine, Walter said. 3 tours. I've killed men in ways you've never imagined. I've survived things that would break your mind. And I've spent 28 years in the worst prisons this state has to offer. He smiled, that sad, knowing smile. You think you're dangerous, Marcus? You're a child playing king in a sandbox. I've seen real monsters. I've fought real monsters. He paused. I am a real monster. The room was frozen. So here's what's going to happen, Walter said. You're going to let go of me. You're going to walk away, and you're never going to speak to me again. In return, I'll let you keep what you've built. I have no interest in your throne. I just want to be left alone. Tank's hands were shaking. I could see it from across the room. And if I don't, his voice had lost its confidence, then we'll find out which one of us walks out of here. What happened next lasted less than a minute, but it changed everything. Tank made his choice. He shoved Walter backward and swung, a massive right hook that should have taken the old man's head off. It never connected. Walter moved like water, fluid, effortless. He stepped inside the punch, too close for Tank's size to matter. His hands shot up and struck Tank's throat. Not hard enough to kill, just hard enough to make him choke. Tank staggered. His hands went to his neck. Walter moved again. A sharp kick to the side of Tank's knee. The joint buckled. 280 pounds crashed down. Another strike. Palm to the nose, blood sprayed. Tank tried to grab him, his massive arms reaching out. Walter caught the arm, twisted, leveraged. The snap echoed through the silent room. Tank screamed. In less than 20 seconds, the king of Block D was on his knees, one arm broken, blood pouring from his face, gasping for air. Victor charged forward to help. Walter didn't even look. His hand came up with something metallic, a sharpened piece of steel that appeared from nowhere. Take one more step. Victor froze. This ends here, Walter said. His voice was still calm, still quiet. Your boss made his choice. Now you make yours. Walk away. Keep your lives. Keep your operation if you want. I don't care. He looked around the room at all the watching inmates. But understand this. I am not your enemy. I am not trying to take over. I just want to be left alone. That's all I've ever wanted. He tossed the weapon aside. If anyone else wants to test me, I'll be in my cell. He turned and walked away. Tank was still on the ground, cradling his broken arm, tears streaming down his face. The king had fallen, and nobody moved to help him. The guards came eventually. They found Tank injured but conscious. He refused to say what happened. The code, even broken, held that much. He was taken to medical. Broken arm, broken nose, damaged throat. 6 weeks of recovery. When he came back, everything had changed. The council had fractured. Deshawn had tried to take over, but lacked Tank's physical presence. Victor had transferred to another block, wanting no part of whatever came next. Kenny kept his gambling operation, but paid a percentage to no one. Malcolm disappeared into the shadows, running his contraband operation independently. And Big Tank? He was still big, still intimidating in appearance. But the aura was gone. Everyone had seen him on his knees. Everyone had seen him beaten by an old man in less than 30 seconds. Fear only works when it's absolute. The moment it cracks, it crumbles. Tank kept to himself after that. Ate alone. Exercised alone. Never looked in Walter's direction. Never spoke about what happened. 3 months later, he was transferred to a minimum security facility. I heard he became a model prisoner, took classes, joined a rehabilitation program, got released early for good behavior. I like to think Walter actually saved him, broke the cycle, gave him a chance to become something other than a monster. But maybe that's just wishful thinking. I found Walter in the yard a week after the incident. He was sitting on that same concrete bench, watching the same clouds. I sat down next to him. "How did you know he would swing first?" Walter smiled. "Men like Marcus aren't complicated. They've built their entire identity on strength, on dominance. When that's challenged publicly, they have to respond. It's not a choice. It's who they are." "And everything you said about the Marine, about killing that guy, James Carter?" Walter chuckled. "I was a Marine. That part's true. 2 tours, not 3. And James Carter was real. I did kill him. But it wasn't some masterful plan. It was a fight in the showers that got out of control. I spent 4 years in solitary for it." He shook his head. "The secret isn't being dangerous, Derek. It's making people believe you're more dangerous than you are. Most fights are won before anyone throws a punch. They're won with words, with presence, with the stories people tell about you. But you did beat him, in seconds. I'm old, not helpless. The military taught me things I've never forgotten, and prison taught me more. When you spend 3 decades fighting for your life, you learn a few tricks." He looked at me. "But here's the real lesson. Tank wasn't defeated by my hands. He was defeated by his own fear. The moment doubt crept in, the moment he hesitated, he was already beaten." I sat with that for a while. What happens now? Now, nothing. I read my books. I do my time. I wait for whatever comes next. Same as I've been doing for 28 years. "Don't you want more? After everything you've done?" Walter was quiet for a long moment. "I did terrible things, Derek. Things I can never undo. I took lives. I destroyed families. All because I was angry at a world I thought owed me something." He turned to look at me. His eyes were tired. "I don't want power. I don't want control. I don't want followers or territory or respect. I just want to spend whatever time I have left trying to be something other than what I was." He stood up slowly. "That's the thing about prison. It gives you time. Time to think. Time to regret. Time to, maybe possibly, become a different person." He started walking back toward the building. "The question is what you do with that time." I got released 14 months later. Good behavior, clean record inside. A second chance I wasn't sure I deserved. The day I left, I stopped by Walter's cell. He was reading, same as always. "I'm getting out." He looked up and smiled. "I know. Congratulations. I wanted to thank you for everything you taught me, for making me see things differently." Walter set down his book. "You taught yourself, Derek. I just asked the questions. You found the answers." I hesitated. "Will I ever see you again?" "Probably not. I've got at least 2 more years before I'm eligible for parole. At my age, who knows what happens between now and then?" He stood up and extended his hand. I shook it. "Go live a life worth living," he said. "Pay your debts, not because you're afraid, but because it's right. Treat people with dignity. Find something to believe in that's bigger than yourself." He squeezed my hand. "And if you ever find yourself becoming the bully, remember how it ends." I nodded. I couldn't speak. I walked out of Millbrook State Penitentiary that afternoon, stepped through the gates into sunlight, breathed free air for the first time in years. I never went back. It's been 4 years since I left Millbrook. I've got a job now, a small apartment, a life that's nothing special but belongs entirely to me. I volunteer at a youth center, trying to help kids avoid the mistakes I made. I think about Walter sometimes. Wonder if he's still there, still reading his books, still watching the clouds. Last year, I heard a rumor from someone who'd done time at Millbrook. Said there was an old man who ran the prison's literacy program. taught dozens of inmates to read, helped hundreds more get their GEDs, changed lives with patience and quiet wisdom. Said the guards respected him, the inmates loved him, said even the hardest criminals would sit and listen when he spoke. I smiled when I heard that. Some people use their time to build empires of fear, to dominate, to control, to become the very thing that destroyed them in the first place, and some people use their time to become something better. Walter Briggs spent 12 years watching bullies run their blocks. He'd seen men like Big Tank rise and fall across 3 decades and a dozen prisons. And when he finally arrived at Millbrook, he didn't try to become the new king. He just reminded everyone that no king lasts forever. And there you have it, the true story of how an old inmate walked into Millbrook State Penitentiary and ended the 12-year reign of the most feared man on Block D. Not with an army, not with a gang, just with wisdom earned through decades of hard time and a refusal to bow down. If this story moved you, if it made you think, if it kept you watching until the very end, then do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button right now. Join the Behind Bar Tales family. We've got hundreds more stories just like this one. Stories of survival, stories of redemption, stories that prove that even in the darkest places, there's always hope for something better. Drop a comment below. Tell me what you think. What would you have done in Derek's position? In Walter's? In Tank's? And share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who might be going through their own battle. Someone who needs to know that it's never too late to become a different person. Until next time, stay strong, stay smart, stay free. This is Behind Bar Tales, and we'll see you in the next one.